Good evening and welcome to tonight's Committee of Adjustment meeting. For those of you who have a cell phone, I'll ask that you take this opportunity to turn the ringer off, or if your phone happens to ring during the meeting, please ensure to answer it outside of the room so it doesn't disturb the meeting. Now, members of the public who have an interest in this application, it's very important that you fill out your name and address on the sign-in sheets located just inside the main doors on the right-hand side, my left on the right-hand side of those doors. Most important that you fill out your name and address. The notice of decisions for the applications we will review this evening will only be forwarded to those who have either presented a written request for that decision or for those who have recorded their names and address on the forms located at the door. Furthermore, a formal request for a written decision is necessary to be advised of a possible Ontario Land Tribunal hearing, and in order to be allowed to make a presentation at an Ontario Land Tribunal hearing, which is commonly known as the OLT. For those of you following remotely, if you would like to be notified of a decision of the committee, or any appeals that may result, then please send an email to our Secretary-Treasurer, Ian Clendenning. And Ian's email address is posted behind me. And so I advise you to make note of that. Now I'd like to share with you the 5-part format that I'll be using as we work our way through the applications this evening. In the first part of each application, I will start by introducing the application, and if you are the applicant or the applicant's agent, I ask you to come up to the speaker's area on my right or on my left. You can use the microphone, and then I'm going to ask you to state your name and address for the record, and you'll have an opportunity to provide the committee with any additional information you feel is pertinent or have the opportunity to make any specific requests of the committee. In the second step of the meeting, I will invite the members of the committee to ask questions of either the applicant, their agent, or city staff. In the third step, I will open the meeting to the public portion, and during that public portion, I'll be inviting members of the public to come up to the speakers areas, again, on the right or on my left, where the microphones are, and if you're on Zoom, please do raise your hand and I'll recognize you. I'll then ask the members of the public to state their name and address for the record, and they'll have an opportunity to make a statement or to ask questions. Now, during this part of the meeting, please do not expect an immediate answer or a two-way dialogue in reply to questions or a comment, as it is during the public portion of the meeting where we record your questions and comments, and only after the public meeting is closed will those comments and concerns be addressed by the applicant, their agent, or city staff. Each member of the public will be given permitted to speak to 5 minutes, and I'll do my best to give you a signal of warning at a 1-minute mark. Further, it would be very helpful if members of the public and speakers do not repeat the same questions or concerns of a prior speaker. So if someone has already covered a point that you may want to raise, don't feel compelled to do it because we've heard the point already. In our fourth and final step, I'll give the applicant, their agent, or city staff an opportunity to address the public comments. In the fifth and final step, I'll turn the meeting back to the committee members where we will make a motion, deliberate on the application, and render a decision. We'll then go back to the top of that order and repeat the same process for each and every application. So I'll turn to our committee clerk. Do we have a quorum? Anna.
Through you, Mr. Vice Chair, I can confirm that we do have quorum. Currently missing from the committee is Somnath Sinha, and regrets were received from Peter Skibo.
Okay, thank you, Allison. Committee members, we have a chance to review the agenda. We also have an addendum which was sent to us today consisting of a total of 7 letters from 4 area residents. May I have a mover and a seconder to approve the agenda as amended by the addendum? Doug, please. A comment or question? Oh, yeah, okay. You move, Jeff? So, is there any discussion on the agenda at all? No, seeing none. All in favor, please raise your hands of approving the agenda as presented and amended. That's carried. We have the minutes of the previous meeting of August 19, 2024. We need, the committee members have had a chance to review the minutes. Can I have a mover and a seconder to adopt those minutes as presented? Moved by Councillor Sinani, seconded by Doug. Is there any discussion on the motion? No, seeing none. All in favor, please raise your hands, and that's carried. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest? No, seeing none. We have no delegations this evening. There are no requests for deferral, and there are no returning deferral items. So moving into our business portion of the agenda, item 1 is an application for minor variance for 901 and 915 Alnwick Lane. Ian, can you introduce the application, please?
Thank you, and good evening through the chair. Application D13051-2024 is an application for minor variance for the property located at 901 and 915 Alnwick Lane. A minor variance is requested to increase the permitted height of a detached accessory building to 7.3 meters.
Is the applicant or agent present in the room or online? Please state your name and address for the record and advise if you have anything you wish to add.
It's Mike Preston and 74 Gore Street. I'm the agent for Alexander and Bonnie Wilson. Sorry, Alexander and Bonnie Smith, who live at, or who own 901 Alnwick Lane.
A little closer to the microphone.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Do you want me to repeat or?
No,
That's okay.
But just in case questions come up.
I think it's a pretty straightforward application. It's a very large property, close to, or I think it's over 11 acres actually. The closest property line this building will be, it'll be 26 meters from the closest property line, so little to no effect on any neighboring properties. Yeah, I don't really have much to add, but happy to answer any questions.
One moment. Did the committee members have any questions for the applicant? Seeing none, I think we can move to the public portion of the meeting. Is there anyone present in the room or online that wishes to speak to the application for 901 and 915 Alnwick Lane? That's going once, going twice. Anyone wish to speak to the application for 901 and 915 Alnwick Lane? And going a third time. Anyone wish to speak to the application for 901 and 915 Alnwick Lane? And seeing no one, we can close the public portion of the meeting. Is there any further, can I have a mover and a seconder from the committee members to approve the staff recommendation as submitted? Moved by Councillor Sinani and seconded by Councillor Hassan. Any discussion? No, and seeing none, all please raise your hands if to approve the motion as submitted. And that's carried unanimously. Thank you. Thank you very much. Our next item of business is an application for minor variance and consent for 757 Front Road. Ian, could you read the application into the record, please?
Thank you. Through the chair, applications D10-027-2024 and D13-059-2024 relate to an application for consent and minor variance for the property located at 757 Front Road. The applicant is proposing to create 2 residential lots measuring 405 and 660 square meters. Minor variances are requested to the minimum lot area for the severed lot and the minimum rear yard for the retained lot. I will also note that the addendum contains 5 letters of concern regarding this application.
Thank you, Ian. We have the applicant's agent present in the room, and I think the applicant is online as well. Could you give us your name and address and add anything to the matter that you might wish? Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Vice Chair, my name is Kelsey Jones. I am a registered professional planner with Photon Planning and Design. Our address is 4 Cataraqui Street, Suite 315. I am here this evening representing the applicants on the noted applications.
And do you have anything you wish to add?
Just that I have reviewed staff's report, and I am in agreement with their recommendations. I also acknowledge the public correspondence that has been received on the applications, and I am happy to answer any questions that the public or the committee has this evening.
Thank you. Do the committee members have any question for Ms. Jones or the applicant online? Jeff?
There we go. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Question for the applicant here. The property here is losing its rear yard. My question is the side yard, is that going to adequately function as a new rear yard for this property?
Through the Vice Chair, you are correct that that south portion of the existing property is going to be what is proposed to be the severed lot. Sorry, I'm just trying to pull up the concept plan. Bear with me. So because the existing driveway for the property is from Joreen, the area that is going to become the east yard of the retained lot, that will continue to function as the backyard. So it really is more of a technicality from a zoning bylaw perspective, what's defined as the front and then what is defined then as the rear yard. So the reduction that we're seeking is from a technicality standpoint going to function as a side yard, with what is known as the side yard for the property to function as a rear yard. So the area for the rear backyard that's going to be provided will be more than sufficient for the retained parcel.
Thank you. Another question here then is we're looking at a 1 meter side yard. What impact is that going to have on the retained house? What kind of a wall is it facing into the what's going to be the side yard of the new property?
Through the Vice Chair, the building face on what would be the new dwelling on the severed lot hasn't been designed as of yet, so we're not certain as to where that window placement would be in terms of that overlook or visibility between existing and what would be proposed on that lot. What I can say though is that existing building face where that 1 meter setback is, there's only 3 windows and they're quite small and they're towards the rear of the dwelling. So from an interface perspective for the existing dwelling, there wouldn't be much. And there's certainly sufficient area on the other yards to provide that access if they needed more than that 1 meter.
Okay, thank you. And through you, Mr. Vice Chair, a question for staff on this property. The severed property here is to be around 400 square meters. New properties in the areas to the north of the former township, how does this size of this lot compare to newer single-family properties in the newer developed areas?
Through you, Vice Chair, an inventory of lot sizes within the area has been conducted with respect to the lot size, specifically with consent applications that have been approved in the past. The range of lot areas are between 540 square meters and 630 square meters. Although this lot for the severed portion is smaller than the lots that were approved as part of the consent application, it does provide a suitable building envelope. There is no increase in the lot coverage for the dwelling. It wouldn't be considered as overdevelopment of the area. So although the lot is smaller, it is able to function as an appropriate lot in terms of access, as well as parking and other elements such as that. Thank you.
Thanks, and through you, Chair, just to build on what Ms. Eusebio has been highlighting as to the size of the property, to your question, Committee Member Jeff, the lots north of this subdivision, so newer lots, modern lots, those currently building out north of Princess Street, they typically have lots that are between 250 square meters to 460 square meters, sometimes even 500 square meters for a single detached dwelling or a semi-detached dwelling. So this lot at just over 400 square meters is in line with what we see for modern day lots in new subdivisions. So it's not an atypical size when you look at the inventory of single family lots that are created around the city today.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Councillor Sedani?
Yeah, through you, the question to staff about, so can you, for the new building, would it be constricted to, say, height and elevation of other buildings that surround it? So they wouldn't be able to build like a 3-story if there's no 3 stories next to them based on the zoning they would have to comply with?
Through you, Vice Chair, the building height as allowed by the zoning bylaw for the applicable UR zone is 9 meters for flat roofs and 10.7 meters for other roofs, which would allow for a 2-story dwelling. Anything above that would require further review and a minor variance. So a 3-story building would need further review and relief.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from the committee members? Okay, seeing none, I think we can open the public portion of the meeting. If there's any members of the public who wish to address. Oh, I'm sorry, Gary, please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Chair, I just wanted some clarity on the existing building rear setback. Is it 1 meters or 1.2 meters that is being proposed?
Thanks, and through you, Chair. The setback for the existing dwelling is 1.2 meters from the newly created lot line. So that is the zone minimum actually for an interior side yard in this area. Functionally, this is this interior side yard, even though it is their rear yard in accordance with the zoning, but it is 1.2 meters. Just one.
Thank you. And subsequent question, Mr. Vice Chair, with your permission, is there any information available on the existing deck's height?
Thanks, and through you, Chair, I may pass this to the applicant. We don't have any indication of what the existing deck heights are on the back of the dwelling, but it looks as though from the imagery that we've seen, they're first floor decks, so they're not elevated decks on the existing building.
Through the Vice Chair, if I may just clarify, the existing deck that's on the furthest south portion of the dwelling is proposed to be removed to accommodate the severance. The other deck that would remain, I believe, is elevated on the property.
Okay, I just want to clarify a point with Ms. Jones. When you refer to the other deck that's elevated on the property, I take it you're referring to the deck that's depicted on the concept plan. It's shown in cross-hashing on the rear southeast corner of the existing building. And that's a second-story deck, is that correct?
Through the chair, yes,
And that's an existing second-story deck?
that's correct.
Okay. Thank you. Is there any further questions from members of the committee? Oh, I'm sorry. Councillor Stephen.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Through you. I have many questions. I'm going to limit it to two because I know there are people who will be speaking as members of the public who will ask these other questions. So my first question is actually for the applicant, if I may, through you, Mr. Vice Chair. I'm wondering if the applicant would mind telling us what the intent is for the severed lot. Like, for example, it's, I believe, a two-story building. Is it to live in? Is it to rent? Is it to sell? Thank you.
Through the vice chair, the intent is to have, the intent is to build and to sell. So the intent would be to have a new owner occupy that dwelling.
Thank you very much. And through you, Mr. Vice Chair, as well. This is, I think, more a question for staff, but we're here for a minor variance. And there are a million ways you could see this playing out, right? We're here today, we know what what the committee's got in front of them today. But as we go forward, is there anything in policy or just procedure that we have to prevent people from getting minor variance upon minor variance upon minor variance? Do you know what I'm saying? I hope I've explained that well. So it's, I mean, we can ask for exceptions. Exceptions are, part of rules. That makes sense to me. But what is in place to make sure that we're following those proper policies? Thank you.
Through you, Chair, thank you for the question. As it stands right now, the application at this time involves two variances, that being the to reduce the lot area for the severed lot, as well as to reduce the rear setback for the retained lot, which actually acts as an interior setback due to the driveway location along Joreen. So if there, at this point, the proposed development for the single detached dwelling is at its maximum with respect to the lot coverage. So any building expansion beyond that would require subsequent minor variances should these applications be approved. So then we would, any further applications or building expansions would require further review with respect to the planning merits of the proposal, also review our official plan, our zoning provisions, as well as technical requirements. So there is additional review that needs to take place, which would determine if we would see the proposal as appropriate and sound planning.
Thank you, and through your chair to Councillor Stevens. Just to build upon that, I think Mrs. Avio brought up a great point that every application for a minor variance is a public process. So should someone want to continually make changes to their property, they are not exempt from coming before this committee and a review by staff. So some people might look at it as death by 1,000 cuts. Well, the 1,000 cuts are public facing in this forum. So if someone wanted to, say, change their zone permissions, it's not something that they can just do. They would have to make an application. There'd have to be potentially supporting studies depending on what they want to do. So if someone wanted to increase their building envelope on the site, so cover more of the lot with buildings, or reduce their landscaped open space, we would also put forward technical requirements that they would have to meet. That would mean, in this instance, probably a stormwater report to go along with that, which costs money and takes time to develop and then has to be reviewed technically. But in addition to that, we also want to make sure that new development fits within the character of an area. So if we're exceeding the 30% lot coverage, what does that do for the compatibility of that new building in the surrounding context of the existing neighborhood? So they would still have to come forward and meet all 4 tests of a minor variance and reviewed by staff and brought forward in this public forum.
Through you, Mr. Vice Chair. Thank you. That helps clarify sort of the procedure and process involved and how it's not just automatic. There's a lot of extra work if someone were to want to apply and make more changes. I'm also glad you flagged drainage. I'm sure someone will mention that. Thank you for your time.
If there are no further questions from the committee members, I'll open the public portion of the meeting. If there are any members of the public present or online who wish to speak to the application, I'll ask you to raise your hands. Oh, Doug, sorry.
Sorry, Mr. Chair. I just have a question for staff. It's not clear to me, the application was prepared and submitted, we reviewed it, and then a bunch of letters came in after the documents came to us. These documents have already gone through all the various hierarchies. Based on the letters that came in since then, does this come to us to make a decision on parking and trees and things like that? Or does this go back to those departments to respond to those letters? Thank you.
Thanks, and through you, Chair. So staff have reviewed all of the letters that have been submitted on this application to date and weighed that against our opinion on the application so far. So we've taken a look at the concerns that have been raised and the suggestions that have been brought forward on potential conditions or modifications to the application. And typically when we do that, we have to balance, okay, do we want to make changes here this evening to their notice of decision and their conditions that go along with that? Or do we want to request a deferral of the application so we can have an additional time to consider it and consult with our internal departments? After reviewing all of the public comments, we don't feel the need to request a deferral of the application this evening or modify any of the conditions to date. We do feel that the staff recommendation as written and drafted is appropriate to facilitate the severance of this lot and the minor variance associated with it. Along with the typical parts of our development review, there are conditions of approval associated with this application that include a servicing plan, a grading plan, and those recommendations, which hopefully will lead to a suitable building envelope on the site, actually have to be built into a development agreement that's going to be registered on the title of the lands. So that lot grading plan that's going to come forward and say this is the appropriate way to ensure that there are no adverse impacts on the adjacent properties. When a person comes in to build that future building, they have to abide by that grading plan. It becomes part of the review through the building permit process. So with all of the pieces that we've seen to date, no, we do not feel the need to modify this application. And there are some things that are outside of what would be the scope of a minor variance as well. So parking changes to the right-of-way on Joreen don't have any weight bearing or effect on this application. It's also not a planning consideration. That would have to be facilitated through transportation services, through their works to actually manage the rights of ways through the city. So if there are existing parking concerns with Joreen and how it's functioning, the appropriate mechanism would be to approach transportation services to have them take a look at that. We have sent the comments to them as part of the review, but if there are additional neighborhood concerns, that would be the appropriate avenue to have a right-of-way modification considered.
Councillor Hassan.
Yes, sorry, Mr. Vice Chair. I was just following up Doug's question. Is there a mechanism we have in place that when applications submitted for minor variances, we city let the public know and the neighbors know this application came in, and to look into that process?
Through you, Chair. Sorry, Councillor Hassan, can you repeat the question? I want to understand it to make sure I can respond appropriately.
Okay. When people submit application for minor variance and staff start looking into that application and studies and everything else,
Yep.
do we inform the neighborhood for that properties or the people concerned, or might be they will be concerned, let them know that application came in, that's a variance required, and that's what the study is going to take place, and then we can make decision. So I didn't understand if that process was in place and time was given to the public, why we just got 5-6 letters now right before we sit on the committee, and all the time, if let's say I say, okay, consider those letters, we have to send you back that application, you have to go through again. And it's again, it's the time and, it's more efforts. I just want to know, is enough time and sources available for the public to know ahead of time?
Thanks, and through you, Chair, I'm excited to answer this question with a musical interlude playing in the background. Thank you, through you, Chair. Councillor Hassam, there are different... Hassan? I apologize. Councillor Hassan, there are different notice requirements for committee of adjustment where we provide notice of a complete application when it's first submitted for things like a zoning bylaw amendment. That doesn't exist for the committee of adjustment. It's not a requirement under the Planning Act that when an application is submitted, that neighbors receive notice of the submission of the application. Under the Act, they receive notice that it is going to a public meeting. So that's why I think what you typically see with this committee is letters come in when the notice goes out. So that typically is 14 days out from a committee of adjustment meeting that we send the required notice out to the public and the sign is posted on the property. So I think that's the difference in notice requirements that you're seeing.
Dare I ask if there's any other committee questions? Okay, I see none. I believe I see none. Okay, so if there are no other further questions of committee, I'll open the public portion of the meeting. And if there are members of the public present, and I'm sure there are, who wish to speak to the application for minor variance and consent at 757 Front Road, I'll ask you to raise your hands physically or virtually. And to attend at the microphones on my right or my left. Please proceed. Commence with your name and address for the record, and you have 5 minutes. Hold on. There.
I'm sorry. My name is Margot Jones. I live at 60 Doreen Drive with my husband, Kendall Watts. I'm speaking as a concerned resident with a few concerns that I'd like to address. First of all, as a neighborhood, I'm sure I can confidently say we feel like the trust is being broken with the city, who believe the zoning amendment, the residents who believe the zoning amendment agreed upon in 2019 is being disregarded and pushed through, not being adhered to like we all agreed upon back in 2019. And we talk about abiding by the rules. However, the rules in 2019 are not what we're being discussed today. And also the properties, in keeping consistency, are not matching what this current proposed severance size is. Both height, because it's surrounded by bungalows. This is a 2-story proposed building, and it's surrounded by bungalows. So we're not keeping consistent with those in the immediate area. And when everybody gets paid off this tiny parcel of land, so the city will get their taxes, the developer and the property owner will sell the property, where does that leave their long-term residents who are stuck with this dwelling that was too big for the land and right against their properties? And others worried that they may be next. Where are the checks and the balances and accountability if the variances fail but still go through anyways? I also want to know, with the landscape changing, but not for the betterment of the current residents, and once the development, if it goes through, won't be able to be undone once everybody's left and moved on, sold the land and moved on to the next issue in the city. And as well, the city tree canopy, that is so important that the city pushes to the city residents. However, we have quite a few mature trees along that tree line, and they are at jeopardy, with their root systems and if they're in the way of the property. So there's one on our property and there's one on the 757 property that we're concerned about, and that also affects the floodplain in terms of our drainage or water absorption in the ground. We don't want to risk our property for somebody, to have a piece of land and sell it for their gain. And also, I also want to know, why should the long-term residents have to move? If you say you don't like it, you can move. Why should the long-term residents have to move for the sake of allowing residents to build on their land and sell it? So these are just a few concerns. And as this is a heritage community built in the 1940s and 50s, and we're talking about modern day lot sizes, this doesn't match in keeping with the current neighborhood, with the sizes of the current neighborhood. If we're keeping in a heritage community and the lot sizes and the lot shapes and the building sizes. And that's all I have. So those are just some of my questions. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak to the committee this evening? Oh, please, come step up, sir. Name and address for the record, and you have 5 minutes.
There, we're on now. My name is Ron Cameron. My address is 52 Joreen Drive. My wife has lived at that address on and off since 1968. We moved there as a couple 22 years ago. We are long-standing residents, as I'm sure you'll recognize. I have questions because most of my concerns are regarding future traffic problems, difficulties for pedestrians in the area, and likewise, the possibility or probability of increased parking. I understand those are not the purview of this committee, so I will set those aside for now. I do have one question for the staff member who quoted the size of lots north of the concerned property. It's quite obvious to anyone who knows that area that the neighborhood is south towards the lake, commonly known as Reddendale South. It was subdivided, as Ms. Jones said, twice. The first part in 1948, I believe, for the development to the east of what is now Days Road. Subsequently, in the mid-50s, for the area to the west of that, which includes Joreen Drive, Lakeview, Joreen, and then further development on Lakeshore in the mid-70s. All of which, those lots were subdivided in an appropriate manner and consistent with the neighborhood as it has always existed. Now, we've seen a trend in the last few years of these large lots being severed and fairly large single homes being developed there. And while it has yet to hit our street, I'm sure that either upward development of the current residences or something similar is bound to happen. Don't get me wrong, we all understand that that is a possibility. But the character of the neighborhood has always been the large lot, the accessibility to nearby schools, in particular the one school where almost every child in the neighborhood, from Lakeshore all the way over to Sunny Acres, walks to Sinclair Public School. In the entire neighborhood, there are only 2 or possibly 3 streets that have curbs and sidewalks. The domino effect in this type of development is fairly common. We all know it. You allow the severance, and then all the variances, and then all the future minor variances that will increase the footprint of the development and the height of the development are concerns. So my question is, to the staff member, can she repeat the survey on property lots south of the proposed development and tell us then whether or not this so-called minor variance is still appropriate in her mind? I dare say she won't find it that way. And is there any way that this committee can justifiably express their will to limit the height or footprint of the development and limit it to a single family unit as opposed to multiple dwellings or multiple units? I'm not sure that you have that purview, but I think that's a concern, as again, it goes towards density and future traffic and, implications.
Any members of the public wish to speak further? Oh, yes. As always, name and address for the record, and you have 5 minutes.
My name's Pam Manders, and I'm at 23 Lakeshore Boulevard. I've lived there since 1953, with the exception of a couple of years. My concern is if this severance takes place, this variance is acknowledged, what kind of precedence that sets for the neighborhood. I have neighbors on either side of me who are in their mid-80s, and if their lots are fair size, and if we can get 200 square foot properties accepted as, I don't know what this one's going to be, what is it, 400 square feet? Meters? 400 square meters? Yeah. But if that is accepted as standard from this point on, I could be surrounded by about a dozen houses, and that concerns me. And I exaggerate when I say a dozen, but not far off. Okay, that's all.
Thank you. Please. Welcome. Name and address, and you have 5 minutes, sir.
I'm John Williams. I own the house across the street from Jareen, but actually my address is on Redden Street. I actually have 2 residences there, the 129 Redden Street and 229 Redden Street. My concern is with the setbacks, which will make fire safety more difficult. And if you have been following the news, you'll notice there's an awful lot of fires going on around Canada and floods. By reducing setbacks, that's a problem as I see it. I also would like to just point out that my second residence, which I've recently completed, required me to take the sewer through my own personal sewage system, which was on Redden Street. And I was unable to access the sewer system, which is under Front Road. I think city planners informed me that it would be extremely difficult to get to that particular sewer system. Thank you.
Any other members of the public present who wish to speak to, please, sir. Name and address, and you have 5 minutes.
My name is Kendall Watts. I live at 60 Doreen Drive. This proposal will impact my property the most out of any property for this proposal. I would like to give us a little bit of background. After reading the sign that was posted is when we first started investigating what we can do. On September 9th, after noticing the sign was posted, I reached out to various sources for a legal opinion. I learned about the implications of Bill 23, which the City of Kingston has not updated their signage on their lots, that there is no appeal process, that this Board of Adjustment is our last chance because the members of the public do not have an appeal after this tonight. So we're counting on this member, this Board of Adjustment to make a decision on this, and also your verbiage tonight that it was displayed. There's no appeal process, so I don't know why that's not been updated. So in seeking clarity, I contacted planning firms, including the IBI group, the NBS group. Although they offered some initial consultation, both firms expressed reluctance in engaging further to represent us here tonight, fearing repercussions from future dealings with the City of Kingston. We had to go outside of the City of Kingston to obtain legal advice and planner advice because of how much collusion is happening here with development. Incredible. In 2024, designers have a monopoly on planning in the City of Kingston. I was also told not to mention the fact that Margot and I are both city employees since 2005 and 2006 because that could be a problem. Incredible, incredible. I also was told by the planner that they're considering the 4-story retirement home zoned commercially as one of the comparable buildings in this build. The property that they're proposing is adjacent to 5 bungalows that this property will look into all 5 people's yards. We have a corner lot. Our only lot that we have for access is our side lot. This property, the proposed property, is going to be built 1 meter from our side lot. That's their only access, our only deck, our only lawn, our only green space with the 80-year-old maple tree. So furthermore, seeking further insight, we had to seek information from planners from other municipalities confirming that the proposed severance and minor variance do not meet the 4 required test as sent out in public notice last week. We could not find anyone that would support that this severance supports the 4 minor variance tests. So why is it the city's backing this? What's going on? Somebody needs to be held accountable. Also, the infrastructure in the Randall community. In the last 12 months, we've had 6 water main breaks within 1 kilometer of this proposed address, 8 sewage backups, 12 flooded basements, and persistent issues with wetlands that the City of Kingston Public Works Department had to make aggressive ditches to drain the water off of the newly constructed large properties on Lakeview. And also to add to the persons that added a late information to this was the 3rd story was just put on the property on Lakeview on Friday, and it's going to tower over every single property on Redden and Lakeview. So, and also, there's no parking for anybody up front of that building too, that threeplex that just got constructed on Lakeview. So it's almost the size of the retirement home, so good job there. I'm sorry, I'm just a little bit passionate because I can't believe, I've also went to legal opinion with Cunningham and Swan in Kingston to pay for a legal opinion on this. And they retracted their services on Friday at 2 p.m. and would not return calls, saying it would be a conflict of interest and it would affect their dealings with the city of Kingston. So when a member of the public can't get legal representation in Kingston to represent them here, or another designing firm, there's definitely a problem with the designing and planning department here in the city of Kingston. Thank you.
Any other further members of the public present that wish to speak to the application for 757 Front Road? Seeing nobody online.
Through you, Mr. Vice Chair, we do have 3 members of the public online. Just a reminder, if you're online, the raise hand function should be in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. I'm not seeing any movement.
Okay, I think we can close the public part. No, I see your hand up. Did you wish to speak? No? Okay, sorry. I think we can close the public portion of the meeting. And I'd like to turn back to Ms. Jones. I'm sure she has some thoughts she wishes to pass on to the committee. Please proceed.
Through you, Vice Chair, thank you. I will go through a few that I feel that I can answer, and then I'll turn it over to Mr. Barr to supplement afterwards. I would just like to reiterate that there's no variances being sought related to the proposed building on the severed lot. So the concept plan that was submitted with the applications shows a building envelope with approximately 1,300 square foot dwelling. So that box on the plan is approximately 1,300 square feet. And you know, we've demonstrated that a dwelling of that size can comfortably fit without any reductions to further setbacks, reductions to lot coverage. The intent is to meet the zoning requirements on that severed lot. And I can appreciate that some of the existing dwellings in the area are 1 stories. The existing dwelling on the retained lot is 2 stories abutting what will be this new property. So the intent would be to maintain, be consistent with the dwelling on the existing property. Regarding the potential for tree loss, it is likely that some tree removal will be required to facilitate the proposed building envelope. However, at this time, we don't know the full extent of that. It's not the intent to remove all the trees on this building envelope. You know, the applicants are interested in doing what they can to protect as much as possible. So that will be further evaluated through fulfilling the conditions of the consent and looking closer at those locations and ensuring that what can be protected can. Sorry, just going through the comments. In terms of the potential for fire safety and difficulties from that front, any proposed dwelling on the severed lot will be reviewed through the building department. So the assessment of OBC and the fire code will be completed through that. So the fire department will be reviewing to ensure that the proposed dwelling is adequate to ensure that there are no fire concerns. And regarding the reduced setback for that, the other what will be the east side setback as well as the north setback along Front Road are more than sufficient to accommodate movement, whether it's from fire or any other emergency services to ensure that there's access. And then I did just want to clarify that the setback to 60 Joreen, so the property to the south, that setback is shown on the concept plan is 2 meters. Not 1 meter. which exceeds the minimum zoning requirement for an interior side setback. And those are the questions that I had noted, and I will turn it over to staff.
All right, thanks, and through you, Chair. So I'll pick up from there. There are a number of questions that I'm going to cover, so I will address them kind of one by theme and then move on to the next one. So there were questions about dwellings being too big for the land, the size of the lot not matching that of the area or what's commonly within the area. And then there was another, you can't hear me? All right, can you hear me now? Is that better? Okay, I will stand closer to sit closer to the microphone. And then there were other comments about the limiting of the type of built form in this area. So with that, I'm going to start about the lot sizing. So when we looked at Reddendale and we're looking at the size of the lot that's being severed, yes, this is, I think, one of the smallest lots that would be in the Reddendale area. So that's south of Front Road. So that we are very clear on. The comments we brought up about lots north were just highlighting, different lots that are being severed around the city. But when we're looking at Reddendale, yes, this will be one of the smaller lots. But to say that this type of development is inconsistent with the area doesn't take into account other corner lot severances that have happened throughout Reddendale. So on Lakeview Avenue alone, 53, 57, 50, and 46 Lakeview are all the result of corner lot severances. These were lots that have severed off their mid-lot areas. Same with Redden Street. If you go down to Lakeview Avenue where it meets Lakeshore Boulevard, 8 Lakeview and 3 Redden Street. Oh, sorry, no, that's not Redden. I believe that's Gordon. 3 Gordon, 3 Lakeshore Boulevard are all the result of corner lot severances. So Reddendale has evolved over time. If you look at the original subdivision plan for Reddendale, the lots were actually severed with about 143 feet of frontage. So all the lots there today are about half of that. So Reddendale has evolved over time from being originally planned with larger, wider lots to a history of severances that have led to the pattern of development that you see here today. And some of the last severances now happening in this area are corner lot severances because they have large, generous side yards, not necessarily always utilized by the residents that live there, and they're seen as an additional opportunity for intensification through the area. So this type of application is not the first of its kind in Reddendale, but we're starting to see less and less of them because there are less and less severed corner lots left. As both Ms. Jones and Ms. Eusebio have pointed out, there are no zone changes proposed for the severed lot. So the zoning that's going to apply to that lot is the same zoning that applies to every other lot in Reddendale that hasn't gone through a zone change or a minor variance to amend its permissions. So that's, and I will highlight that the zone, the UR4 zone that's in place today for Reddendale is the exact zone that was passed in 2019 as part of the Reddendale rezoning work that happened. With that work, there were no changes to the maximum height permissions in the zone. That remains the same across all lots. So even though the development of this area has predominantly seen bungalows or smaller 1.5 to 2-story buildings, doesn't mean that an existing dwelling cannot be added to or demolished and have a new building built on that property that could be up to 3 stories in height with a flat roof at 9 meters tall or 10.7 meters with a peaked roof. That zoning applies equitably across Reddendale today, and if anybody wants to make changes with it, they have to come forward to this committee or to Planning Committee to seek zone changes. So none of that is changing with this severed property. There were questions about limiting the type of development in this area to single-family dwellings. There are a lot of changes that have happened in a short period of time in Ontario. So the past 2 years with the developability of properties, Prior to the changes the province brought into effect, the city passed zoning amendments to allow additional residential units on the property, albeit it was one at the time, and then we went up to two, so one in the main building, one in a severed, and then the province mandated that each property allow up to a maximum of 3 units, so either in a triplex format or 2 in a duplex format inside and 1 in a rear lot line. So regardless of any changes the city may make to zoning at this time, given the provincial legislation, each property within the city that's on urban services with a ground-oriented type of unit, so single semi-town, can have up to 3 dwelling units in it. In addition to that, council recently passed 4th unit provisions, so limiting a single property to a single family unit. Even if we passed a recommendation here tonight to build that into the conditions of approval, would not be able to be upheld because of the legislation that's in place that allows a person to have up to 3 units per property. And City Council recently also passed a 4th unit per property with limitations on the number of bedrooms. So each property, whether it's this newly severed one or the existing homes throughout Redendale, can all have those considerations as well. Regarding Bill 23 and appeal rights, we are required by the Planning Act to post the verbiage that we do for signs and mail-out notices. One particular thing to note is that says, I forget the exact language, but it says, should you have the, it essentially boils down to, should you have the ability to appeal, here are your appeal rights. We're required by the province and the Planning Act to post that. You actually have to then go to the Planning Act to see if you are a qualified person who can submit an appeal. So I understand that that language may be confusing when you're reading a sign and you're seeking, okay, do I have a right to appeal here? This says that I might. And then that opportunity doesn't exist. So apologies for the terrible language that we have to post sometimes, but it's required by the Planning Act, and we don't have the ability to necessarily clean that up at this time, but we're waiting for an additional OREG to drop eventually that will hopefully help clean up some of that language. But that appeal right language is consistent across the Committee of Adjustment application suite, as well as those that go to Planning Committee. Okay, in terms of addressing the, I guess it's the letters that we've received to date about, different planning firms in the city holding different, opinions, and then there was, a second letter that came in to address that. I will say it's not uncommon for, different planning organizations to have different opinions on an application, especially when we see larger applications come before planning committees. Different persons can be represented by different planning firms, and oftentimes they will submit letters, raising concern with some things that might be passed which could impact an adjacent property. That's not what I've seen here before you today with the letters that have come in. We, as staff, will always assess every public comment that's submitted to us by individual or profession and weigh that against the recommendation that we're making here today. And so with the letters from everybody that we've had come in, it doesn't change our planning opinion on the application. And I think that's where I'm going to leave that point for now. I don't have anything additional to add beyond that unless I've missed something, and I can happily readdress something that we have missed. And Mrs. Sabio, do you have anything additional to add at this time? Okay, great. Thank you.
One moment. All right, at this point, I wondered if there's any additional questions from the members of the committee for Ms. Jones or for the city staff. Oh, yes, Gary.
My question is in regards to the impact on the streetscape itself. So I saw in the information that was provided to the committee that the staff determined that there are no significant impacts to the streetscape or the character of the neighborhood. So I just wanted to understand objectively how staff came to that recommendation.
Thanks, and through you, Chair. When we were looking at this application, you have to look at a property and think, how could it be modified? outside of our purview. And a lot of the trees that you see there on the property or shrubs fall outside of city purview to control anyways. The trees that are on this property are not subject to a required tree permit under the bylaw. So members of the public here would be free to modify the vegetation concerning their property. They would also have the ability to put up accessory buildings in this area. So when we're looking at the ability for someone to modify a property, it is there for each of these individual properties through the subdivision. Additionally, when this lot is being contemplated for severance, we're not modifying the frontage requirements of the zoning bylaw to support the width of this new lot that's being created. And then when we also zoomed out and looked at the neighborhood at large, there was a history of corner severances throughout this neighborhood. So it's not a precedent setting or leading example of a type of development in this area because it has predicated other applications for corner lot severance in this area. So while it does remain a change, it's not one that stands alone. There are numerous examples of corner lot severances through this neighborhood.
Any further any questions from other members? I do have a question, James. Oh, sorry, Gary.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Just a follow-up to that, the comment in regards to the shrubbery and the trees. So when I look at the aerial view, I understand that it may be confusing, but is the opinion that there are no municipal trees on the municipal side of this lot on Joreen Street or Joreen Drive?
Thanks, and through you, Chair, yes, in examination of this property and where the lot lines fall, we don't see any trees fall within the municipal road allowance. So while some of them may overhang the lot line in terms of their tree canopy, the physical tree rooting itself is within private property and therefore subject to the exemptions under the tree bylaw.
Yes, James, I do have one further question to that point. My understanding is that single-family dwellings are not subject to site plan control. How then does the city staff, if at all, deal with tree conservation in the context of a severance and the development of a new single-family dwelling on a property that supports existing vegetation of size and contributing to the character of the neighborhood? And also, how might it deal with the relationship of the development to trees on abutting lots?
Thanks, and through you, Chair. So the tree bylaw was written with an exemption for residential properties when it was conceived. So the tree bylaw seeks to control trees within the municipal boulevard, so trees within city control, but also trees within either environmentally protected areas, such as a significant woodland or a contributory woodland, environmentally sensitive areas, environmentally designated lands, as well as large development sites. So anybody seeking a comprehensive rezoning for a multi-unit residential building that was not developed on a lot conceived through a plan of subdivision would have to go through the tree bylaw. So currently, with the way the bylaw is written, it just does not apply to a single-family residential, townhouse, or semi-detached lot across the city. That's just the way the tree bylaw is currently written. So that is, there's no mechanism for us at this time to have that level of lens and purview into a private property and their vegetation for trees.
All right, so the decision of retaining trees is a choice of the landowner and what relationship they may work out with their neighbor in terms of proximity of excavation to the lot line, protection for trees on abutting properties and so forth. It's up to the landowner to deal with it.
Correct, yes. So for on-property trees, it's at the whim of the property owner. If there are boundary trees or trees adjacent to a lot line, it's a civil matter. It's a private matter between the landowners on how to deal with that interface.
Okay, thank you, James. Oh, Councillor Stevens?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. This is really difficult for people. So understanding that the final decision is this committee's choice, which I am not a voting member of, I'm wondering after tonight, so if this does not pass, what happens? If this does pass, what happens? What are next steps? What can residents expect in terms of opportunities to voice opinions, be involved? Where do we go after tonight's vote, whatever happens?
All right, thanks, and through you, Chair. So we'll talk about both options individually. So if this does not pass tonight, what happens? We'll do that one first. If this does not pass tonight, there are several different avenues that could unfold. The application could be denied, and the applicants could choose not to seek further consideration of the application, and therefore it would not proceed. The other avenue is that the applicants do have the ability to appeal the decision of committee to the Ontario Land Tribunal, and it could go forward for an Ontario Land Tribunal hearing. At the Ontario Land Tribunal hearing, members of the public can make representation, so they can write in or participate as a participant. Recently, we saw an OLT chair at a Committee of Adjustment hearing qualify a couple members of the public as a party. Party status gives you equal weight as, the city or the applicant in that discussion to actually ask questions and cross-examine. So those are the options outlined if this does not pass this evening. If this does pass this evening, the next step is the minor variance goes into effect subject to the passing of the consent application. From there, the applicant has to fulfill all conditions of consent, which are outlined in the report attached as Exhibit A. And then from there, they have the next 2 years to fulfill those conditions, and that's done with staff at the staff level. Should members of the public want to continue to participate, they could reach out to the file planner to inquire about the status of how those conditions are being fulfilled, and potentially provide comment or review of those. But at that point, it becomes an administrative matter to fulfill the conditions with city staff.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. So you mentioned conditions that are in Exhibit A. I read those, I don't have them memorized. What I'm wondering is, are the conditions that are attached to this severance standard? Are there any others that have been added previously in terms of privacy protection or anything like that? What I want to know is, is this sort of the cookie cutter? Are there things that could reasonably be added if necessary? Is this the opportunity we have to do this?
Thank you, and through you, Chair. I've also been given a note to talk a little louder, so I apologize if my voice sounds like it's gone up a little bit, but I just want to make sure that everybody can hear the answers that I'm giving this evening. Looking at the conditions associated with the consent, a lot of them are boilerplate, but what we have seen with this one, which is important for the Redendale area, is the requirement for a grading plan to be reviewed and accepted by engineering staff. The grading plan is then also part of the development agreement. So the recommendations from the noise study and the grading plan are going to be registered on the title of the lands so that any subsequent owner then has to follow them. To the second part of your question, is this the opportunity to add to or amend conditions of approval? Yes, this would be the opportunity to have that discussion to amend conditions of approval here this evening by committee. So Committee of Adjustment does have the ability to amend the recommended conditions. I would just note that if that is an avenue we want to go down, that If we're writing a condition to amend, I would suggest, give staff the idea, maybe we have a recess so that we can appropriately write that out to make sure that it actually meets the requirement of what we're talking about. But this would be the avenue to do it. And then the third part of that is that something we've seen before where we're talking about mitigation? So typically we do write consent conditions or minor variance conditions if there are mitigating factors that need to be addressed. The ones that we have before us tonight were the ones that staff found to be appropriate for the application, but we'd happily consider any other ones that you want to bring forward this evening.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair, or to you, Mr. Chair, I guess. I'm wondering, and I apologize for taking up all your time this evening, I appreciate it. I'm wondering if there might be an opportunity for a recess to discuss with staff when it's appropriate. And I know I can't ask that because I'm not a member, but I'm just putting it out there to you.
James, when you said we, when you were referring to we, you were talking about staff, whereas I think it's up to the committee to decide whether to amend the conditions of recommended conditions of approval respectfully, not
Correct.
staff.
That is up for you to do that. I just want to ensure that what's being written can just be appropriately reviewed so that the language is implementable. So I don't believe there's an ability to just recess and have the discussion. I believe this has to happen with committee here in open. And then when you're looking to actually put the verbiage down, draft some verbiage, and then I believe staff can review that if I've got that correct to the committee chairs.
Okay. I think what has to happen is the motion, which has been recommended by staff, has to be get on the table with a mover and seconder, and then we move into discussion, and it's in that discussion where matters come forward different than what staff has recommended. So my comment would be to the councillor, if there's something you wish to ask the committee to consider, say it now.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I hope the committee could consider and potentially put a motion forward that the committee has another look at what other mitigating, not factors, but measures we could put in place. The reason I ask is that this property is very close to the one beside, this isn't coming out right. It's not too close in that sense, but I can see why the residents at 60 Joreen have concerns about this house being built so close to them and with increased height. I think that it's reasonable to expect privacy based on where they're located and what they've come to expect. I'm not opposed to infill development. It has to be done well. It has to be done respectfully. So if there are ways that the committee could consider ensuring more privacy, I would really appreciate if you could do that. And I'll leave it up to the committee to do that. Thank you.
Doug, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just wondering if that discussion might be suitable for a deferral.
Well, I think, again, that determination would occur in the context of a mover and a seconder, I think. You have to go through the process of getting the staff recommendation on the table, supported, debated, and then I would think perhaps an amendment. Is that correct? Okay. Do you have something, Jeff? No? Okay, nothing online. So, members, I think we now can move to the decision stage. And, sorry, Gary, please go ahead.
One question for staff, Mr. Vice Chair, if that's okay. Sorry, after that, Jordan may have a point as well. So I just wanted to ask about the build plans for the development. It's not unusual for the committee to receive that, to get a concept of what the dwelling will actually look like, except for just telling us that it's a two-story house where the windows are, and so on. So I just want to understand from a process perspective why that wasn't provided to the committee.
Thanks, and through you, Chair, I'll start with the answer, and I don't know if Ms. Jones will have anything additional to add. So typically with severances, we either see a conceived building envelope because someone knows what they already want to build, or we just see a general plan highlighting a building envelope. Both are applicable outcomes of a consent application to create a new lot. So with the information that's before us today, it's sufficient to sever a new lot. The Committee of Adjustment decisions as well, unless we're amending zone provisions, don't necessarily lock down the entirety of a building envelope. And through the consent process and minor variance process, we also don't have an ability to control for materiality. So a lot of the visual work that will come to committee sometimes to demonstrate a new building envelope is just to do that, to demonstrate the building envelope. But, you know, here we don't have a conceptual massing, but that's also an appropriate outcome for a severance application.
Jordan, did you have something you wish to raise?
Just that we usually have a discussion period once the motion's put on the table, and that's when I'll save my comments for.
Agreed. So is there a mover and a seconder for a motion to adopt the staff recommendation as presented? Moved by Councillor Sinani, seconded by Councillor Hassan, and discussion. As committee members, anyone wish to start with any particular points?
I think I'll start if I may, Mr. Vice Chair.
Please do.
Thank you. Can everyone hear me okay? Okay, in any event, that was the first time that I've seen a back and forth commenting. Usually each individual, whether you're city council or not, gets 5 minutes. That's been unusual. I've been here for 6 years doing this. In addition to that, there's a number of correspondence, a lot of which do not fall within the four corners of what we do here. So I'd ask you, committee members, to keep your mind on our focus, our narrow focus. Certainly, I believe that the first two tests are sufficient here for the four corners, the four tests that we consider. The fourth test, whether this is a minor variance, you know, the subjective, objective test, there are, as Mr. Barr pointed out, there are some precedents here of other corner type lots being amended this way. I think the number one thing that we have to think about is the third test. Is this application desirable for the appropriate development of the lands in question? I've been on many of these applications now, properties downtown, properties in the West End, where people are trying to you know, insert a new property. I think that's the number one focus for us here today. That's what I'm going to leave it at.
Thank you. Any other points members wish to raise? Councillor Sinani?
Yeah, so just like the context, like technically like all these properties could have 3 dwellings or 4, depending. Like the direction has changed and with the province, but can we add conditions, say like what type of fence, like a certain height, and like no windows on the upper floor that would be facing 60 Jolene? Would that be something reasonable that this committee would consider adding as conditions?
I don't think you're asking the question rhetorically. You're putting it to the committee as something to think about.
Yeah, like I think it's not unreasonable. I have seen like some developments that have happened that probably should have had conditions at some point. So I'm just wondering from staff, is this something that would be reasonable in your opinion, or even if the applicant has something to add to that?
Proceed, Ms. Jones.
Through the Vice Chair, I will leave it to staff as to whether that's appropriate to include. I think what I may just add is that whatever fence that would be added to the property line between the two properties would be regulated by Kingston's fence bylaw. So the maximum height of that fence is permitted under that bylaw is 6 feet. So any fence would ensure compliance with that fence bylaw. And in terms of the no windows, I mean, like I said, the dwelling hasn't been designed at this point, but certainly the applicants are aware of the neighbors' concerns related to privacy. We will need to provide detailed review and detailed design of the dwelling through fulfilling the conditions of the consent, should the committee conditionally approve it this evening. So we will need to put thought into that detailed design, and that will be determined prior to the consent being fulfilled. So I am aware, as are the applicants for this, as to the neighbors' concern, and certainly they are looking to address those as they move forward into the detailed design of the dwelling. Maybe just again to just reiterate that we are not seeking any relief related to the setbacks on the severed lot to the neighbor's property.
Does staff wish to add anything?
Thanks, and through you, Chair, I'm just trying to think a little bit more on this. Is it appropriate to limit the windows on the south side of the building against the interior lot line? I think to date, we have not seen that as required, given the nature of the subdivision and how it's built out. The adjacent property's dwelling is located further south, so they're not directly adjacent to each other in their current arrangement. Additionally, if you tend to build closer to a lot line, the building code automatically restricts how much windows you can have adjacent to a lot line. So the closer you build to it, the less window and glazed opening you can have. The further you build from it, the more you can have. That being said, you know, they've proposed a 2-meter setback on their current plan. Zoning allows 1.2 meters. So depending on the range of the setback, if they stay at 2 meters, they can only have so many openings on that side. The limitation would restrict the interior layout of the space, so it would impact the design, overall design of that building. I don't think necessarily from a staff perspective we saw it as appropriate. I don't know if, hearing the concerns, that it would be a staff decision to include that condition as part of the minor variance, but we would take instruction from committee as to how you'd like to proceed.
Is there any exemptions for, say, fence height in the bylaw?
Thanks, and through you, Chair. I don't know about any exemptions in the fence bylaw for fences that are taller than required for residential areas. I'd have to look into that fence bylaw more. That is a bylaw under building, not planning. I do have some knowledge of it, but not of the complete list of the exemptions for fence height.
Okay, so I'll just run it by the committee if they're interested in adding conditions or not, or that's something. I don't know if we can have a discussion about that.
Is that a motion, Councillor?
I don't know if I'll think about it.
Okay. Any other discussion by any other? Jeff.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I get a feeling we are essentially looking at policy on the fly here without any backing. I think staff have done more than enough of a review on this property, and considering the existing fencing, privacy, et cetera, conditions under the zoning bylaw, I'm perfectly comfortable with this application as it is. Thank you.
Any other committee members wish to speak? Seeing none, Councillor Stanani, do you wish to table a motion, an amending motion, excuse me?
Not sure yet. if we didn't do that, you mentioned that they would really consider the privacy of the neighbors when building. Are the owners of the current property that they're retaining, are they planning on staying there as neighbors themselves?
Through the chair, that is correct. Their intent is to continue residing at the retained property. They don't have any plans of leaving, so they would become the neighbors of the new house to be built.
So it would be in their best interest to keep things in good rapport with the neighbors then, considering what they're building.
Through the chair, certainly, yes. That is correct. Yes.
Okay, thank you. I'm comfortable with this.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Slaney. Any other? Oh, Mr. Barr?
Thanks, and through you, Chair, I have looked at the fence bylaw on the fly, and there are exemptions in the fence bylaw for fences that don't meet the requirement of the fence bylaw, but were required and approved as a condition of development or redevelopment. So they can be permitted to be taller than what's regulated by the fence bylaw if approved as part of a comprehensive development application. So if the fence bylaw requires it to be a 6-foot fence and we approve an 8-foot fence here through the Committee of Adjustment, it's deemed to be in conformance with the fence bylaw at that point because it was approved through a committee of the city.
Did that change anything for you, Councillor?
Yeah, I'd like to put a condition for an 8-foot fence in between the two properties.
Okay, I think we should just take a brief break, allow staff to draft the condition as they wish, and then we can have a mover, seconder, and vote on that amendment. Members who are online, could you come back on camera, please?
Hello?
Okay, we have a mover for the staff recommendation as presented. We need a seconder for the staff recommendation as presented. Councillor Hassan seconds the motion. Before we deal with that motion, though, we have a request by Councillor Sinani to amend the staff recommendation. So, Councillor Sinani, I trust you move the recommendation. Do we have a seconder to add a condition pertaining to fencing? Councillor Hassan will second the motion on fencing. Is there any discussion on the amendment to the motion? Yeah, well, staff should, Ian, can you put it up? Where is it? Ah, here it is. So is there any discussion on the amending? Oh, Jeff?
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Question here is the City of Kingston already has an acting fence bylaw, which I believe stipulates 6 foot high in the urban area. We are essentially superseding the City of Kingston's fencing bylaw in this case, and I think we're going a bit outside of our responsibility. Thank you.
Any other discussion by the members? All right, seeing none, I think we can call the question on the amending motion. All those in favor of the added condition of approval pertaining to fencing, please raise your hands. 1, 2, 3. And those opposed, please raise your hands. 1, 2, 3, 4. So the amending motion to amend fails. So we return to the original motion for which was moved and seconded. All those in favor of adopting the staff recommendation as presented, kindly raise your hands. And those opposed? And that's 2 opposed. That carries. Thank you very much. I appreciate your patience. We'll now move to the third item of the agenda, which is an application for minor variance for 590 Cataraqui Woods Drive. Ian, if you could read that into the record, please.
Sorry, through the Vice Chair, application D13-065-2024 is an application for minor variance for the property located at 590 Cataraqui Woods Drive. The applicant is proposing to include a wellness clinic, animal care, animal shelter, and recreation facility as complementary uses within units 1 and 2.
Okay, we have applicant's agent present. Anything you wish to add, sir? State your name and address, please, first.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. My name is Jason Sands. I'm here on behalf of the owners. I've reviewed the 6 conditions that are proposed to be incorporated in tonight's decision. We have no objections. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Do the committee members have any questions for Mr. Sands?
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. And a question for the applicant. We're looking at an animal shelter here. Animals are known to bark at all hours of day and night. How is this to be mitigated?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Vice Chair, sorry. Thank you for the question. My understanding is some of the restrictions respecting that would be regulated through the noise bylaw, of course, through the City of Kingston. Also, site plan controls applicable to the subject property. There's no outdoor component to this unit. Unit 1 and 2 are the only units of this building that are proposed to be permitted for these 4 additional complementary uses. So should that use be incorporated, it would be solely limited to the internal operations of the building and not your exterior kennel type uses that I think you'd be familiar with in in other areas of the city. Thank you.
One more question then. I take it it's an awfully long way to a residence from this property?
Thank you for the question, and through you, Mr. Vice Chair. I don't have the number in front of me, but yes, this is an employment area designated in your city official plan and within your zoning bylaw. So there are no sensitive uses in the immediate vicinity. That's correct.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the committee members? Oh, Councillor Hassan.
Is this property commercial, when you say it's employment land?
Through you, Mr. Vice Chair, that's correct, yes.
And that shelter will be indoor, you said? The animal shelter will be like indoor facility?
Yes, through you, Mr. Vice Chair. Just trying to pull up the plans. So units 1 and 2 in the existing building of 590 Cataraqui Woods Drive are the only 2 units that are subject to this application based on condition 5 that's before you this evening. And those units are, if you look at any of the floor plans, committee member, you will note that it's very much designed for an office type use. It's our expectation and that of the owner that the wellness clinic use would be much more of the likely use given the existing built out of that unit as opposed to, for example, an animal care or an animal type use. However, of course, they are incorporated as complementary within tonight's consideration. So by all means, yes, they are being considered.
Any other questions from the committee members? Okay, seeing none, I think we can open the public portion of the meeting. Is there anyone present who wishes to speak to the application for 590 Cataraqui Woods Drive? Going once. Anyone present who wishes to speak? No?
Through you, Mr. Vice Chair, I do have 3 members of the public online, one with their hand up. That would be Mark Ether.
Mr. Ether, please state your name and address, and you have 5 minutes.
So my name is Mark Etche. The address is 598 Catwoods Drive. I'm fully in support of the application, but I'm confused. I have a notice of public meeting in front of me, which says 590 and 598 Cataraqui Woods Drive's variance, which matches the variance that you're specifying for just units 1 and 2. So I guess my question is, why is this not applied to all 14 units, not just the first 2?
Through you, Mr. Vice Chair, the application for this one was just for units 1 and 2, just because it was specific to the owner that owns those 2 units. We included 590 and 598 just so we could have just the general provisions for the property as a whole. However, this would be specific to the 2 units within 590 Catwoods.
Is there any other members of the public that wish to speak online?
Through you, Mr. Vice Chair, we do have 3 members of the public online. If there is anybody else that would like to speak to this item, please raise your hand in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. I'm not seeing any movement.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll call one more time. Anybody in the room that wishes to speak to the application for 590 Cataraqui Woods Drive? Okay, seeing nobody, I think we can close the public meeting, and I do believe that Mr. Etier's question has been answered. Moving forward, is there a committee member wish to move and the member to second the motion? Moved by Councillor Sinani, seconded by Doug. And Jordan. Any discussion on the resolution to adopt the staff recommendation as presented? No, seeing none, we can call the vote. All those in favor to adopt the staff recommendation as presented, please raise your hands. And that's unanimous. Thank you very much. There are no motions this evening. There are notices of motion. Is there any other business from staff? Nope, seeing none. The correspondence we've received and dealt with by way of the addendum. The next meeting for the Committee of Adjustment is Monday, October 21 at 5:30, and that meeting is strictly virtual. Don't have to come to the council chamber. Can I have a mover and a seconder for adjournment, please? Moved by Councillor Sinani, seconded by Councillor Hassan. All in favor, kindly raise your hands. Thank you very much. And the meeting is adjourned at, what is it, 7:17.